Today I am with a special guest. It is our CEO of Phore IO, our main sponsor of our upcoming tournament, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here today. So, how are you?
I'm doing great.
That's fine. That's fine. I wanted to know more about this project since you tried to sponsor our first tournament, and yeah, I tried my own researches, and I kind of like your project. Mainly the marketplace. It's great.
Mhm.
Really, it's a great work. The project behind is good. I didn't have time to read the white paper yet, but I think it's a good project, Battle. Absolutely. So I think we can
Thank you.
start with the questions already, if it's not a problem for you.
Of course. Let's go ahead.
Okay, this is a general question, and I think it will answer many doubts that people will have. What is Phore?
Sure. Well, Phore is a cryptocurrency. It actually started, at least as Phore, in 2017. It actually has a history before that. The original developer launched a coin called CryptCoin back in 2013, which was a different blockchain with a different architecture, and it had they sold WordPress themes, so it had sort of an e-commerce focus to it. That developer had some health problems, and that project kind of went dormant back then for a few years. But then he got healthy again, and he decided he wanted to relaunch it with a new architecture, and so he did a swap over to Phore and relaunched that in, I believe it was September of 2017. And so that became more of a proof of stake based blockchain. It has master nodes. Since then, we've added a lot of different things to it. We added the SegWit protocol to both increase capacity as well as fix some security issues in terms of not being able to change past transactions. And we've made a lot of improvements to like the ease of use and the user experience, because one of the things I found very quickly when I got involved was that many cryptocurrencies and the wallets are just not very easy to use, not very easy to understand. You might have to type in all sorts of cryptic commands, things like that. So we wanted to make it as easy to use for people as possible. And another thing that we really started out with was to say it's not enough to just say we're going to launch a cryptocurrency protocol. We wanted to launch applications that would solve real problems and that really fit in with the vision of cryptocurrency. And so that's one of the reasons why we launched the Phore marketplace right away, was to have the ability to buy and sell both physical and digital goods and services with cryptocurrency completely peer to peer. So there's no centralized platform. There's nobody collecting your information. It's just buyers and sellers interacting directly. Doesn't require any permission. Doesn't cost anything to use. Anyone can set up a store, and it's available in all sorts of languages. So it can be used locally around the world for different things, using local languages, different currencies. It started out using Phore as the main currency, and since then we've added Bitcoin to it, and we're actually about to release a new release that'll add an Ethereum wallet to it. And it also has some features now so you can actually trade cryptocurrency as well as other digital goods and services. So there's a cryptocurrency trading function in it as well. So the idea behind it is that we want to have I may get more into the vision later, but we want to have actual use cases, reasons why you would want to use the product, actual working products, because I think in many cases I've seen projects where they just launch and they're not really developing anything with the blockchain. They're just sort of saying, here's another cryptocurrency. And so we wanted to make sure that what we were doing was useful to people and was solving real problems. And that's really what we set out to do from the very beginning. And we do have a lot of other ideas in terms of where we want to go with the project. In fact, I'm kind of revamping that vision right now, and I can certainly tell you more about that if you're interested.
Yeah, I am absolutely interested. I mean, we can say that Phore is basically an Amazon of the future where no informations are collected by any tech giant. And at the same time, well, you have more functions than the traditional Amazon. Because as you
Yeah,
said, you can
I
just
would not
set,
say that I'm directly competing with Amazon.
yeah, for
The way I look at that is that if really what it was, hey, here's another thing that's like Amazon, but it accepts cryptocurrency, then that wouldn't really be a competitive advantage, because Amazon could just accept cryptocurrency tomorrow, and that would go away. And they may do that at some point, and they probably will. And so I would differentiate it. It does have advantages over something like an Amazon or an eBay or an Etsy, because it really is in that space as well. because it is truly peer-to-peer. It doesn't have platform fees. So, when you buy and sell a product, you're paying directly to that seller. There's no, a lot of times on these other platforms like eBay or Amazon, the platform takes something like 10%, sometimes more, of the purchase price as their fee. And so there's nothing like that on this platform. You are just directly trading with other people. You also don't have to worry about someone saying, hey, you're not allowed to sell this, or you're not allowed to set a price. Like for at one point during the pandemic, some people were selling certain products for high prices because there was a shortage. And, that was another thing that I pointed out at the time was, hey, you can set whatever price you want on the Phore marketplace for a product. We're not going to tell you that you're not allowed to set a certain price for your product. That it gives you that freedom to be able to do what you want as a store owner, and also, be able to get access to things that you might not be able to get on other places. And so, it's meant to be something that can be used locally by communities around the world. It doesn't require a lot of infrastructure. You just have to download the application. You can run it on any normal computer. You don't have to have big servers or, access to anything. But at the same time, you have ownership of your own data, ownership of your own listings, and you can advertise your own store and be able to do that sort of thing all on your own. And so I think that's partly what we have right now. And then if you want to get more into the vision of the future, I want it to be much broader than just an e-commerce related thing. The thought process I've been going through, and this is based on a lot of more recent things that have developed in terms of people's vision for things in the future, is I see a concept of more of a community-based thing. And Phore has always been very community-based, so it fits right into what we're trying to do. And what I'm envisioning is that the application platform we're building will evolve to have more of a social networking component to it, where you can join networks and form networks and have more aligned groups of people. And so you would have, for example, the ability to have a chat app or other types of being able to post content and being able to say those can be private to a particular group of people. And so you could potentially have public things like Twitter or Facebook where pretty much anyone can see what you're posting. But in this case, you could also say, okay, this is just for my community. And so you can set up a community, people can join that, they can join other communities and have access to that content. But you can have that membership sort of group within that network. And I think there's a lot of benefits that come from that could really make it a very strong concept in terms of saying, by having aligned groups of people that can use these tools, they can essentially gain a lot of influence and help the entire group achieve whatever objectives they have. So, for example, one of the components I'd like to add is more of a training or education component, where you can say we can have a course or a curriculum of courses, or you can say if you want to teach certain skills, or if you want to kind of level up in a certain area, gain a lot of knowledge, you could have a set of courses for that membership group. And being able to kind of measure along the way, did this person complete these courses? Did they get to a certain level? Do they have a certain level of knowledge? Maybe there could even be some kind of certification that you've gotten to a certain level with that sort of thing. And, one of the models that I like along those lines is not really cryptocurrency related, and it's also not decentralized. So that's one of the key differences. But On Deck is one of the things that I read about in terms of what their vision is. And what they have is it's more of like a startup incubator concept, where they have an education track for startup founders, and they have another track for developers that want to be part of a startup, and they have another track for investors that want to be an angel investor in a startup. And so they have education tracks for all these things, but because it is somewhat network based and they go through in cohorts, then they can actually kind of form these networks as they're going through these courses, and then they actually will end up forming startups with all these resources. You have investors and developers and founders, and so you have kind of all the elements you need to put that together. And I could see that sort of concept really working well in a decentralized network, where you don't necessarily have, again, some centralized place that's controlling everything and deciding who can join and, charging a lot of money to do it, that you can basically do that on your own. And you could have those same tools available to you, and people can decide what sort of focus areas they want, but they could potentially even form companies out of this by putting together all the elements that they need to be able to do that. And I think there's a number of other components that could be added as well, where you could say, even just from a content creation standpoint, that you could have something like a Patreon or a Substack sort of thing, where people can publish content and you can support those creators and kind of join their networks. And again, making it completely decentralized means that it would be permissionless. You wouldn't have to worry about somebody censoring you or deplatforming you. and you would be able to just, again, form your own communities and have your own network and be able to kind of build that influence and following that you have more control over as the creator. And also from an individual perspective, you can decide which one of these things are you aligned with, which of these things do you want to join, which of these things do you want to be part of. And it's a more open system because nobody's really controlling the platform the way that some of the big tech companies are.
Yeah, one of the things you said, that part of creating the communities, and you as a creator, you have control of everything. This reminds me of that just Patreon and maybe Fiverr, because you can just sell your services. Maybe you're a developer and you can sell your services and get paid in cryptocurrency. So we can say also that Phore is kind of a fusion between Fiverr, Patreon, and well, Amazon, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I see a really good fit between what we've already built and what we're planning to build, because even if you just envision one of these communities, whether it's just a membership group of a certain type or people with aligned values, they might want to be able to kind of create their own economy, right? Like they might want to sell their own products and services to people in their communities that have aligned values with them. And so I think that marketplace would still be a very key component within there to say, you would be able to say, if let's say you have a gaming community, since we're talking about esports in terms of what you're doing here, you might say we'd have a gaming community, and then people might want to buy and sell products to that gaming community or within that gaming community. If there's certain products or services or even in-game items, that could all be kind of kept as a private group where you could have this economy that's private to that group, and you could use cryptocurrency as the payment mechanism. But you would, again, have complete control over being able to say, who am I selling to, who am I buying from, and what products are being bought or sold, and all those things.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering, since you started talking about all this type of decentralization, two questions I have right now. The first one: how do you try to avoid scams inside the site? Because it's a public marketplace, so everyone could sell something that actually doesn't exist, or he only tries to scam people. How do you try to combat this, if you ever had a problem like this in your platform?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have thought about that, and there are...
That happens. Okay, I can see you now.
Looks better? Okay, great. Okay, so I think we were talking about the ability for people to potentially scam people, and I think that the way that is handled in the marketplace today is there is a moderator function, and so that's another decentralized component where anyone can be a moderator. But we have what we call verified moderators, which means you have to certify your identity to be able to do that. But it's also, even the verification of the identity is done in a decentralized way. We're not collecting people's IDs like an exchange might, or asking people to send us their private information. The way it works is it would use something like Keybase, where you would be able to say from your Keybase account, you can link your marketplace account to that Keybase account, and then you also link your social media accounts to that Keybase account, and it's all cryptographically linked, so you can prove essentially, I'm the owner of this Twitter account, I'm the owner of this Facebook account, I'm the owner of this website, I'm the owner of this marketplace account. So if you have longstanding social media accounts that are already tied to your identity, then you can use that to certify that you also control all of those things. So, for example, you might post a tweet that just says, this is my Keybase ID, to certify that I own this Twitter account. And that shows you have control over that. And you would do that on a variety of different platforms, so that you would be able to say, okay, by having 3, 4, 5, however many you can to certify who you are, then you're really verifying your identity to saying who you are. And that would help to make sure that if you're using a moderator for the transaction, that you know who that person is. So if there ever was a problem with a scam, you would be able to contact law enforcement and go after that person. And the way the moderation itself works is that when you make a payment on the marketplace with a moderated transaction, then it uses a multi-signature transaction, which is a type of cryptocurrency transaction where it requires multiple signatures to be able to be released and spent. And so the way it's set up is it says it needs to have 2 signatures out of 3 to be able to spend that amount of money. And at the beginning, that would be the buyer and the seller that both have to sign off to be able to spend that money. And so the way that would normally work without a dispute is that the buyer would send the money so that the seller knows that it's been sent, but he knows that he can't actually spend that money until the buyer also signs off again. And so when the seller delivers the product or service, whether it's a digital one or whether it's something they're shipping to the person and the buyer receives it, then he would go back into the application and say, yes, I received it, and sign off that the funds can be released. But if
Yeah.
if you had a dispute, like let's say you got the package and it was empty or it was broken or something like that, then the buyer could file a dispute in the application, and then the moderator would get the information from both the buyer and the seller and say, oh, show me the proof that this wasn't delivered or it wasn't delivered properly or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the moderator would be able to decide if that buyer got ripped off, and then if so, the moderator would be able to issue a refund by signing the transaction along with the buyer. And then the same sort of protection would be there for the seller, because you could certainly have the same sort of thing on the buyer side, right? Like they could say they never got the product, but they really did. And so the seller would also be able to file a dispute, and the moderator could look into it. And if it turns out that the evidence supports that the seller did everything they were supposed to do, then the moderator could sign off on the transaction and say, okay, that money goes to the seller because they did what they wanted. So it is a third-party moderator concept, and we may actually even enhance that further in the future. One of the ideas we've been talking about, along with one of our partners, is that you might even be able to have a committee of these moderators where, maybe let's say you have 9 people that all look at this and then they vote to say who should do it, so that then no one individual could even, get away with basically saying, oh, I'm going to make the wrong decision, because you could have multiple people. And the way that protocol would work, at least that particular idea, we haven't decided if we're going to move forward with that. But if we did, the way it would work is you would be able to say those moderators are actually betting on what the outcome will be. So based on the evidence, they would say, okay, I'm actually staking some of my own money to say, I think it should go to the seller, or I think it should go to the buyer. And that's what I think everyone else is going to vote for. And they don't know who the other moderators are, so they can't collaborate with them. And so if you end up betting and then it goes the other way, then you would lose your stake. So it would give you a very strong incentive to vote the correct way, so that you would make sure that you get your stake back and get the fee or the reward that would go with that. And so right now we have that individual third-party moderator protocol, and again, we may be looking at even further improvements in the future. But that's one of the things we have paid a lot of attention to, is to say we want to make sure that there is a lot of confidence that when you buy or sell something, that you would have a successful transaction.
I kind of like this. I mean, it is more a fusion of the protocol that uses Binance with the P2P transaction with the peer-to-peer. So basically, you have to confirm the transaction, you as a seller and also the buyer. So this reduces the scam. But I really love the fact that you have a decentralized moderator type, and you don't know the other moderators, and also the fact that you stake your own money, even if just given by the platform, you are losing money anyway, which you could use for other things. So I really love this, because you are staking your own money to just say the right answer. It's like you are paying to do a debate, but it's a vote.
Yeah, and the way that protocol would work is, if let's say 4 people voted one way and 5 people voted the other way, which probably wouldn't actually happen very often, but in that case, then the 4 that were wrong would lose their stake, and it would be paid to the other people who voted the right way. So it would give, again, people an incentive to say, I want to rule the right way that everyone else is probably going to rule on this particular case. And the other concept behind this is it's another way of earning money, another way of earning cryptocurrency, that it's a decentralized job that anyone can have. And in many cases, it might even be someone with a lot of credentials, because you can choose which moderator you use. So you might even choose someone who has been this type of arbitrator on other platforms, or it might be a lawyer, or it might be someone who just has a lot of credentials to be a trustworthy person. And so as long as the buyer and the seller agree on who that moderator should be, then there would be potentially a lot of trust that this is going to go through properly, because they know that the person they choose is going to be fair about moderating that transaction.
Yeah, I love this this thing. I think if this will go through, it will be a great idea. But passing on with other questions, when did you have the idea to create the marketplace? It was in the first white paper. You had the idea since the start of the project, because you said that you were not the real creator of the project. You just entered as a CEO, but after the project was created. So
yeah, I mean, as far as the history, I actually started as an investor in Phore. I didn't join the team until after it had launched. So the idea was already there. I can't take credit for the original idea, but I would say it was part of the early team that was there before I joined the team that originally had this vision. But I did help write the white paper, so I did help establish that vision, and a lot of the concept behind that again comes back to saying we want to build real applications that solve real problems for real people. We don't want to just have this be a digital currency that again, if you go back to 2017, there was a much smaller number of people that even knew about cryptocurrency and what it did and what it was for. And if all you do is at that point is just deliver a cryptocurrency protocol,
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily going to have normal people understand why would I want to use this. What problem does it solve? It looks more like a solution looking for a problem. So what we were setting out to do from the very start was to create applications that really do solve real world problems and make things better than they are with other types of tools. And then the cryptocurrency is just supporting that. It's the decentralized architecture and the cryptocurrency payment mechanism are things that make it better, but it's also something that it uses these applications that people want to use to be able to do transactions and have some of these things done in a better way than they would have been on other platforms.
So,
So it was there from the start, but
mm-hmm.
I did help sort of guide and shape the vision because I was involved at the time we wrote the white paper. The white paper actually came out a little after the currency itself, but a lot of the ideas were there. It just hadn't been written up in white paper form until about the time that I got involved.
As you, I mean, I don't know if you know, but has been like an EIO or any type of initial coin offering or any other type of um, crowdfunding for this project, or it was just started and then just started and launched as it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the history of Phore has no ICO, no public fundraising whatsoever. It was completely a community driven thing. Even the original Crypt coin was distributed as an airdrop and the developer only took one share, just like everybody else. So it was just completely airdropped to the community, the people who wanted to be part of it, and there was never any fundraising. There was never any ICO. Um, when they launched Phore, they just did a swap from Cryptcoin to Phore. So it was just whoever owned Cryptcoin would be able to redeem that for Phore 1-to-1. So they just switched right over to the Phore coin. And so again, it was just airdropped or swapped from the original blockchain to the new one. And
Mm-hmm.
that was how it was created. And I think we'll maybe talking a little more about Graphene in the future, but that also is being airdropped to Phore holders. So the people who owned Phore at the time we did the snapshots for that airdrop will be getting Graphene coins, and that's the only way that they can be gotten right now. Once we do the airdrops of the tokens that we're about to start doing, then people would be able to get those on exchanges and things like that. But currently, right now, it's just being airdropped to Phore holders. So it's always been a very community driven thing, just bootstrapped by the team itself. And there's the only funding for development comes from the blockchain itself because it does have a protocol in there for a development budget. So it issues a certain number of Phore coins to be able to fund development, marketing, and anything else that would be needed to help enhance the project. And that's also a completely decentralized thing. Anyone can submit a proposal and say, I'd like to do this to enhance the Phore project. And if the community votes for that, then they would get paid that amount of Phore. So currently most of that goes to our team because we're doing all this development work for it, but the protocol itself is completely decentralized. We don't have any more access to that than anyone else does. So the funding is all kind of coming directly out of the project itself.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, you have total governance for the community also on this blockchain. This is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
There are some centralized platforms like Nexo that are trying to emulate what decentralized platforms are already doing since they were created, and this is the governance. I mean, I love the fact that many platforms are now introducing the governance, but it
Mm-hmm.
depends because sometimes they say, okay, we introduce the governance, but just because we wanted to do so. And the fact that
Yeah.
decentralized currencies have this is because they were created from the community. I mean, they were created by the community for the community, and so it is totally community driven, and is great because at this point you
Mm-hmm.
can say that this project will go even further than any other centralized project. Because I mean, there will be always at least one person that says, I have this idea for the project," and people will vote. So I
Mhm.
think that votes are almost endless um, for these
Yeah, I mean,
opportunities.
in some ways it's a disadvantage. In other ways, it's, I think, a big advantage. I mean, I think for projects that do an ICO up front and raise millions of dollars, obviously that gives them a big war chest of funds. They can pay lots of money for things like listing fees or other things. But I think, the problem is that money runs out, right? And so
Yeah.
unless there is some sort of sustainable business model behind that project, what do you do once the funds are gone? And I think that's happened to many projects where they raised a bunch of money and either they mismanaged it or they spent it on their initial development, and then at the end they just don't have any money to do development after that. And so I think for a model to provide funding for the project, to me, it's much better to say it's a much smaller amount of funds per month, but every month there's another round of funding. So it's much more sustainable over a long period of time. And we've been live since 2017, so we're going on what 4 years now, and it'll continue on as long as we can continue building it. I mean, I think it could go on forever, like you said, because even if something happened to me or our team, someone else could step in and get that same funding source through the same way that we did it. And so I think it also gives the project resiliency to say that you're not depending on a particular team or a particular person the way you would if it was all run by a particular company. And so, there is a decentralized architecture behind the coin itself, but the way the funding is set up, it's also decentralized. And I think in many cases, if you look at some other projects, they're not so decentralized when you look at the team, because there's really just a central group that controls the protocol and what happens to it and what work is done on it. And in this case, while we do have a team that's, a professional development team that's growing and
Hmm.
has grown even through the bear market over the last few years, um, we you wouldn't be dependent on that necessarily to say that Phore has a future, because I think the entire community can contribute to it and would be able to have access to that funding source directly coming out of the blockchain project itself. So I think it is a very nice decentralized model.
Do you have a burning program for your tokens? Or, I mean, I'm referring to Binance Coin, for example. They have a burning program. Do you burn your token periodically, or you have another type of, you know, try to limiting the circulating supply of your token?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly able to do that. I mean, one example of that is after the initial coin swap from Cryptcoin to Phore, not all of it was redeemed, and there was a certain period of time where that was allowed to do your redemptions, and then once
Mm-hmm.
the redemption period was over, the rest of it was burned right on the blockchain. So that's verifiable. You can look right at the blockchain and see that that big amount that was originally created when Phore was first launched, it was burned, and it was the only amount that was left over was the people that were the amount that people redeemed through the coin swap. We don't have any formal policy in terms of saying we're going to burn a certain amount. We certainly might do
Mm-hmm.
that in the future if there was a reason to do that. I think it really just depends on the conditions of the market and depends on how things are going. I think the reward scheme itself is set up according to the original parameters and what has been agreed to by the community, which they could vote on again if they wanted to change it. So it's a relatively low inflation coin as it is. And I think part of the idea that I had that I described earlier in terms of all these services that we'd be providing to communities and social networks and things, one of the things that I'm exploring along with that is that a lot of the fees that might be paid for specific products or services that people would use would actually burn the Phore that they use for that. So instead of saying we would charge for a particular service, like, one of the models I'd thought about was saying we'd have kind of a freemium model where you'd say you can use the product
Mm-hmm.
for free at a certain level, and then you'd pay extra if you want the more pro tools or things like that. That would be one way of making sure we had a sustainable revenue model behind the marketplace and all the other things we're building. But I think it's much more compelling to me, especially given the regulatory environment we have, to say that that amount maybe would just be burned, and then so the people on our team wouldn't be directly receiving any compensation for some of those things. Because some of the things, for example, that are coming out of the Congress right now, and one of the bills they're considering is saying that if you're compensated for facilitating decentralized digital asset transactions, then you have to be considered a broker, for example, and that would be very hard to do. It might even be impossible to do for a lot of these decentralized projects. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but in the model that I'm describing, if the fees that are charged for things are being burned, then nobody is being compensated, right? So that
Yeah.
wouldn't apply to us. And I think that is a very attractive model as well, because if those amounts are burned, then the more people that are using the platform and the more that it's used, the more it would reduce the inflation of the supply, and it might even become deflationary at that point. Because once you reach a certain threshold, you would be burning more than was created over time.
Yeah.
So you would still have the incentives for the proof of stake for people to run staking wallets, which helps with the security of the coin. You'd still have the incentive for people to run masternodes. And then you'd also have this other mechanism that would compensate for that and potentially even push the supply deflationary at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem because, of the regulatory system is for decentralized platforms is really, really bad at the moment. I mean, also Uniswap, if you heard the news
Mm-hmm.
later, had some problems with the SEC. So um,
Yeah.
it is
I mean,
not
it's
a good
certainly,
time.
it's something that I think all these governments are trying to figure out and get their arms around, and it's hard to say
Yeah.
how it's all going to play out. I know there's a lot of people lobbying on both sides, and a lot of people in the crypto community are trying to rally to make sure that it's at least somewhat reasonable in terms of what they're trying to do. But again, given the way governments work, they may or may not take into account all the input they get, and ultimately they get to decide what they're going to do from a regulatory perspective. So in some cases, I think you have to say, how am I going to adapt to this, and how am I going to make sure that we stay within the rules? And I think Phore does have the advantage of never having done an ICO, so I think no one could argue with any credibility that Phore is a security, because we never raised any money. So that kind of ends the conversation. And then, again, if we do this model that I'm talking about, you would be able to say, if even if we had something like a Uniswap or something like that, as long as
Mhm.
it's not being paid to our team, then people aren't actually getting compensated for those things. But at the same time, the entire community would benefit from that, because every time you reduce the supply, then that raises the value of all the Phore tokens that everybody holds. So I think it would be a nice model where everyone can benefit from all the work that we're doing, and at the same time be compliant with all these types of regulations that may or may not come down the pike in the future.
And about compensation, because I had the question for a while. Do you have a referral system? If you know what
Um,
I mean.
what do you mean by a referral system?
If some people get a special link, they can share with the friends or people they know, and they can get a percentage of of the volume a person, the invited person, creates inside the
Mm-hmm.
marketplace. And it may differ because some people will sell on the marketplace and some people will buy. I mean, if you get some type of benefit from inviting other people inside the project.
Yeah, I mean, we may look at some of those things. I think you have to be careful with some of those things, because that also might run into some regulatory issues in some cases. Um, depending on how it's structured, that might look like a multi-level marketing scheme, and depending on how that works, it may be considered something that could have regulatory issues as well. But I think if it's structured well, you could probably make sure that it wasn't like that. And I certainly would love to have more mechanisms to attract more and more users to use our products. So I think it certainly would be something I'd want to explore. I would just have to make sure that whatever rules we put around it, especially around any economic incentives, would be compliant with any regulations that might apply to it.
Well, more than that, I think that you have to pay attention of the quantity of coin that people could receive from this compensation, because many times the platforms that have referral commissions over the invited people are already from the start, even without researching, they are considered as a Ponzi scheme. So
Yeah.
maybe you have to behave differently and not say you will get a percentage, but you will get a fixed amount of coins for every invited person.
Mm-hmm.
This will try to have a different impact also on the circulating supply of the coin at the long term, talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to put more thought into that before I would move forward with any kind of referral scheme that had compensation tied to it. I think one of the things that I might look at as an alternative would just be that, with this network concept that I'm talking about, I think there would be a natural incentive to get people to join.
Mm-hmm.
If you join a network, you'd want your friends to join, just like, how Clubhouse launched and said, okay, if you want to join, you have to get a referral from somebody. There wasn't like a monetary reward, but to get access to the content, you had to be referred to it. And I think that created a bit of an exclusivity, especially early on. I'm not sure how much of that applies anymore to Clubhouse, but I think that sort of incentive scheme might work where the bigger the network gets, the more it would grow, because you would be able to, invite all your friends, invite all your existing networks to move to that platform and start using that network. And so by building a lot of value in the network and by growing the network, I think it could have a virtuous cycle on its own to just say that the more people use it, the more valuable it is, and the more other people will want to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about this, actually, the coin in general, why did you choose a post system instead of a proof of work system? Apart from the pollution that it may cause, is there any other reason about
Yeah, well,
this decision?
I would say again, I wasn't around when the coin was created, so I can't take credit for making that decision. But I will tell you my perspective on proof of stake as
Sure.
compared to proof of work, because I do think there are a lot of advantages to it. I think when you look at proof of work in the case of Bitcoin, I think it's a very strong protocol. There's obviously a lot of mining power behind it. It keeps going up all the time. And it would be very difficult for someone to rent enough computing power to be able to say, I'm going to take over 51% of the network. So I think for a large coin like that, that works really well. But what I've noticed and what I've experienced in some cases, because we do work for other crypto projects sometimes, we have clients under the banner of Blockchain Builders, which is another company that I run. And so in one case, for example, someone had a dispute with one of their developers, and then they came to me and said, our developer is attacking our blockchain. And it was a proof of work blockchain. And because it was a relatively small project, they didn't have a ton of mining power behind it. It was just the small community that they had.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is it's not very expensive for someone to potentially attack it, right? So with proof of work, I think it becomes more of a winner take all type of thing where the very biggest projects are very protected. But when you scale down to smaller projects and when you're first starting out, it doesn't have that protection. And so proof of stake, I think, has a much more scalable architecture to it in that sense, where in order to attack the network in the same way, if you were going to try and get 51%, that means you have to buy 51% of the amount being staked. So you have to actually invest your own money and then attack it, which doesn't make any sense because now you're attacking your own investment.
Yeah.
So there's a very strong disincentive for people to attack proof of stake blockchains, at least with that type of attack, where you would have to buy enough of the coin to be able to attack it. It's kind of just becomes a nonsensical thing where no one would ever do it, because if you start with a smaller project, especially if it was a newer one that wasn't very well known, didn't have a lot of liquidity, that would mean you'd have to spend a tremendous amount of money and probably bid up the price many times where you started just to be able to get enough of the coin to be able to do that kind of attack. And then once you attacked it, I suppose the effort would have to be intended to say you're going to drive the value down. So you're going to pay a huge amount of money, and then you're going to do an attack, and then you're going to drive your own investment to make it basically worthless. And it's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot, right? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So I think it's a very natural alignment of incentives with proof of stake, where it still has that same level of protection as you scale up. It would become even more expensive as it scales up to do the same thing, but it also scales down better, where you can say for a newer project or a smaller project that's just starting out, you want to have that same level of protection relative to the size of the project or the market cap of the project. So that's one of the big things I like about proof of stake. I mean, obviously, the discussion in online and social networks now are focusing a lot about the energy usage, and that is another advantage of proof of stake, that you can run it on any computer. You don't have to have these massive data farms and data centers and things like you would for something like Bitcoin. But another advantage along with that is the decentralization. If you want to mine Bitcoin, you probably need to make a pretty big investment if you want to get anything significant back from it.
Yeah.
And so it becomes harder and harder for a small person to do it. Yes, you can join a mining pool and maybe get a particular part of it, but the way it's evolved, you kind of have to have an ASIC, one of these really high-end pieces of hardware to do it efficiently from an energy perspective. And so even that, they might cost $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever they're going for now, and they're even hard to get. So, it's hard for a lot of people to really participate in that process. Whereas if you want to stake Phore, you can just buy some Phore, and now you can stake. You can do it with any amount, and you have the same odds based on the amount you have as anyone else would have with that amount. So you can run it on a regular laptop or a desktop PC. You could run it on a server in the cloud if you want to. You could run it on one of those little Matchbox-sized Raspberry Pis. So it's very inexpensive. It's very accessible, which then means you can have a much more decentralized set of people doing the staking, which means you could have more people doing it. And the more decentralized it is, the stronger the security is because nobody has control over it. So I think for a number of reasons, it has a lot of advantages over a proof of work architecture. And I would be the first to say there are some advantages to proof of work. There are certain parts to the protocol. It might get too technical to go into the details, but there are some things that are easier to do or, slightly more
Mm-hmm.
secure for things like mobile wallets, for example, with proof of work, where you might have to work a little harder to get the same level of security. But I think those are kind of smaller factors in my mind. And it's not like it's just insecure with proof of stake. It's just that you don't have quite the same level as you would with proof of work. So it isn't a all or nothing thing in my mind, but I do think there's a lot of advantages, especially for smaller and medium sized projects. And at the same time, you're not really giving up that much, in my opinion, because when you get to that larger market cap, you still have a lot of protection with proof of stake. So I'm very bullish on that. And the Graphene protocol that we're getting ready to release once we finish the rest of the work for that has an even further improved proof of stake protocol that has a lot of enhancements to it. So we chose proof of stake for that as well.
Yeah, you talked about Graphene. What is this?
Yeah, so part of the initial vision for Phore was we wanted to add smart contract functionality, and the
Mm-hmm.
original intent was that it was going to be a side chain. So we were going to add it on to the Phore blockchain. But when my developer who was working on that really looked into it, he thought it wasn't really secure enough or fully thought through, and he wasn't sure if it would really work at least robustly enough. And so
Yeah.
he thought the original idea that we were going to pursue for that just wasn't really finished. It wasn't really something he could count on. And so as he was doing his research, he came across a lot of the Ethereum 2.0 research and similar things that were going on at that time. And he said, this is a much better architecture for what we're trying to do. I think we should just start over and develop that kind of blockchain. We wanted to make a lot of differences to it. So it's not like just a clone of Ethereum. In fact, at the time, there was no Ethereum 2.0 code. We were actually ahead of them in a lot of our development for the things that we have in common. And even for a period of time, they were using our code for some of the things that we had finished that they hadn't gotten to yet. But the idea there was, by having something that was built from scratch to have all of these smart contract features built into it and have all the right types of things involved to make it really secure, that it would be a much more robust architecture and have a lot of advantages that you really couldn't do if you just did it with that sidechain concept. So it kind of evolved over time where originally we wanted to do this add-on. Then we decided we were going to develop a more robust blockchain that would be like a next generation architecture, which we did. But
Mm-hmm.
then at a certain point, we looked at what we were building and we said, it really doesn't make sense to just replace Phore with that because then people would perceive that probably as an upgrade to Phore as opposed to a new thing. And
Mm-hmm.
they would bring with them all their perceptions of what Phore was. So they would think about the marketplace and they would think about, oh, this is an e-commerce focused project, right? Because that's mostly what we had been doing. And we said that would really kind of limit or hold back what people would think this new architecture is because it has some incredible new features. I mean, it can potentially scale to hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. It can have custom different types of shards, and I can get more into more detail about what that means. But it basically means you can have multiple types of blockchains in the same ecosystem that are tied together, but can have different consensus rules. So you can have a lot of different types of blockchains in the same system. And so it has a lot of customization to it, a lot of features to it. It has the full smart contract capabilities. So you could do tokens and DeFi and a million different things that you can do with smart contracts.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to limit that to just people's perceptions of Phore. And while I do think Phore has a very healthy future based on the vision that I laid out a little earlier, I think we thought the two as independent projects would have more value to the community than trying to keep them together. So we ended up making the decision to launch Graphene as a new project. And
Mm-hmm.
so that would be an independent project that, again, we airdropped to the Phore holders because they were, basically funding the development through that whole process that I described. So really it belongs to them, at least initially. And then right now we're actually airdropping tokens on the BSC smart chain, the Binance smart chain, just to allow people to have the tokens and allow them to start trading with it. And then once we are ready to launch on mainnet, those will be migrated back onto the Graphene blockchain as native coins. And then they'll be able to start using it once the launch is ready.
Wow, this is nice. I mean, getting a cryptocurrency with, wow, multiple blockchains, and well, this opens with more practical utilization over all the projects that may be connected in the future with this cryptocurrency. So this is really great. Also, I think that this will also help people to save money from commissions and the fees that they have to pay to send this cryptocurrency over the same blockchain, but also maybe for a different blockchain. Because I think that, sometimes you can send um, the same currency over two different blockchains, but this
Hmm.
happens with exchanges because they do some type of, sort of conversion in real time, because I can send to you Ethereum using the ERC. At the same time, I can send you Ethereum using the BEP20 blockchain, which is the one proprietary of Binance. So this is great because you can save money from the fees, and at the same time, you get more scalability for the project and also more practical uses.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a variety of ways to go across blockchains. Some of them you have to really be concerned about the vulnerabilities because when you tie two blockchains together, it does get very complex to make sure that the two blockchains stay in sync, where a transaction that gets committed to one blockchain is also
Yeah.
committed at the same time to the other blockchain. That could be very difficult. But one of the methods a lot of projects are using is what they call wrap tokens. And I think the basic gist of that would be you would send your token to on one blockchain to a particular address, and then that kind of holds it for you while it creates a wrap token on the other blockchain to represent that token. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you do a withdrawal, it would just destroy that token on the other blockchain and then give you back the token that was on the first blockchain. So it's kind of a representation of it as opposed to truly moving across, but it is something that people use to do that sort of thing to at least have access to other blockchains. And there are a number of other interoperability protocols, but I think they generally work in similar ways. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we certainly would want to pursue similar things with the Graphene blockchain to be able to participate across the whole ecosystem, including Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, other types of different blockchains. But I think one
Yeah.
of the strengths of the Graphene system itself is that you can have different types of blockchains within that same ecosystem that are already tied together. You don't have to go across blockchains. You don't have to worry about that syncing problem because they're always synced. They're always part of that same heartbeat of the beacon chain, which is kind of what ties them all together. And
Yeah.
so you would be able to say, okay, I can have something like a Bitcoin blockchain where you're doing fast, secure transfers on that blockchain. You could also have something like Ethereum that has full smart contract capabilities. You could have another one that's optimized for decentralized storage. You could have another one that's optimized for identity. Or again, since we're talking about esports, you might even be able to say we're going to have an esports shard that has specific rules that facilitate things that you want to do with esports, whether it was some kind of virtual
Mm-hmm.
game that actually uses a virtual economy that's tied to the blockchain. And if it needed certain features or different rules to support that, we could potentially build a shard that's customized for that purpose. And then you would have your own space within the Graphene ecosystem to be able to use that and have it not really be competing with any other blockchain on the system, but also be able to interoperate with them very easily. So, for example, if you had an NFT for your game and it was
Mm-hmm.
generated on that gaming blockchain, you might be able to move that NFT across to another blockchain. If there was a different metaverse application or something like that and you wanted to be able to do it, it would all be able to be done within that same blockchain, as one example.
Yeah. I mean, that could be a great idea on how to apply also in the world of esports, because yeah, we are focused, totally focused on tournaments as for now, on esports tournaments. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we may use in the future some, some features that are available on Phore. Who knows? Maybe we will rely on some products that you have created, because really it is a great ecosystem. It was created absolutely for the best, and the fact that it's driven community, but this is driven by the community, it's great because
Yeah, and I would love to see that. I mean, we have a very collaborative approach with other projects. We love to
uh-huh.
do things with other cryptocurrencies. I know there is a very tribal culture within the crypto world,
Hmm.
and so a lot of times people don't like to say good things about other projects, but we have kind of the opposite attitude. We have a lot of respect for all the work people are doing for different projects, and we also think that there's lots of room for different people to chase different niches. So if you're chasing esports, I think that's great, and if another project is chasing something else, I think that's great, and there's no reason why you would even necessarily consider them competitors. And if you can put them together to build something even better, I think that's great. So wherever we'd be able to collaborate, I'd be more than happy to go through that with you.
Yeah, the fact that sometimes I'm worried about is that bigger projects will take the smaller projects, they will embed them, and they will just close the the smaller project because it was the competition. This is what frightens me inside the cryptocurrency world in general, because I am talking also about the real life when we have the multinational corporations that try to get smaller companies because they want not their products, they just want to get some less I mean less enemies, if we can talk about
Yeah,
this.
or just to
So
eliminate competition, right?
yeah, exactly. This is what frightens me. I love collaboration between the projects because I think that this is how things should go.
Yeah, I
So
personally think the whole spirit of decentralization to me means you're going to have a lot of diversity, you're going to have a lot of choices, you're going to have different people experimenting with different things. And I think all of that is great. I don't think I'm not anything maximalist. And I understand the argument of people who do that. I'm not trying to offend anybody if you are a Bitcoin maximalist or an Ethereum maximalist or anything like that. But my own perspective is this is an emerging industry. We're still in the very early innings here. And I think
mhm,
there's thousands of different niches that could be tackled with cryptocurrency. And I don't think there's any reason why you would have to say only one cryptocurrency should be used for everything. I think you could have things that are optimized for specific use cases. And while
yeah,
you might be able to argue that graphene could be optimized for a lot of use cases, I still think that's it's just for a certain type of thing, right? Like if you want
mhm,
to have this massive scalability, or you want to be able to customize a shard, you might want to say let's use graphene. But there may be something that's very dedicated to a particular purpose, or might have a very established community for a particular use case, and it might make sense to use them for that. And so I think what I'd like to see is more of that collaborative approach to say let's allow all these different experimentation and let different projects do what they do best, and be able to use interoperability and other things to create the best solutions for people.
yeah. I mean, I totally agree with this. It's great. I hope that the project will go further because really, I like the project. I mean, it's the first time that I'm digging in a project so much, and well, I'm doing it in real time while conducting an Ask Me Anything session. So this is really great. The next question is, what is sharding? Because you just talked about it before, but as shards. So what are shards and what is sharding?
Yeah, so the idea behind it is that you would have a bunch of blockchains that are running in parallel at the same time, but they're also tied together within the same blockchain. So the concept is you'll have a beacon blockchain, which all the nodes share, that you would say this is kind of the heartbeat of the system. But all of the user transactions would be on a shard blockchain that is tied to that beacon blockchain. And it has a
Mhm.
protocol for saying it reports back essentially like an attestation that says, here's a summary of all the transactions that happened over a period of time. So you can go across from one shard to another by going through that attestation process and move coins and tokens across the whole system. But you can also be validating transactions, validating blocks, things like that on each shard in parallel with other ones, which means you get that scalability that you need to be able to say, I want to have this be a global solution that everyone can use at the same time, and not drive up the gas prices or other fees to the moon, because most of these blockchains have kind of an auction based system where it says if you want to be in the next block, you have to pay more than anyone else is willing to pay to be in that
Yeah.
block. So by having a lot more scalability and saying we could have 10 smart contract blockchains all running together, well, now you have 10 times as much scalability before you would start filling up those blockchains and having any of that auction stuff start to come into play. And this could support thousands of blockchains at the same time. So by having all these different shard blockchains running in parallel, you eliminate a lot of that scalability issue and that cost issue for fees. And you also, as I mentioned earlier, you can have custom types of shards that are optimized for specific purposes. So you could say if something needs a lot more storage, like a decentralized storage blockchain, or maybe an NFT specific blockchain that you want to have
Mhm.
really complicated things that are actually stored on the blockchain, you could optimize it for that and say we're going to have really large blocks or other mechanisms that are tied to the blockchain that can store large amounts of data. And another one might be more like Bitcoin, where you'd say we just want to have fast transactions. We don't want to do much of else with it. Maybe it has some limited smart contract capabilities for the types of things you want to do when you're transferring funds back and forth or storing value. But
Mm-hmm.
it would be limited to that, which means you're not competing with people who are trying to do smart contracts for the same thing, right? And
Yeah.
then you might have a set of smart contract blockchains that are used for all the types of things that you see with DeFi and tokens and other things, where those can be done in parallel as well. And again, you can tie all these things together. So if you had a smart contract that needed decentralized storage, you could potentially use both the shards and just use the parts that you need for what you want to try and do. And so I think it's a really nice system for saying you get a lot of scalability, you keep the cost low for people, and it maintains a lot of the security and the decentralization. I don't know if I really have time to go into all the details of exactly how that works, but there's a very strong protocol behind it that says you're not really giving up the decentralization, and you're not really giving up the security to be able to produce that scalability, which actually is kind of a pretty challenging thing to do for a lot of projects.
Wow. This is what I call interoperability for the blockchain. I mean, it has endless possibilities to do, to use also in the real life. So this is great.
Yeah, and this
I
is
mean,
another community driven thing, how we're designing
yeah.
it. I mean, one of the differences between what we're doing and what Ethereum 2.0 is trying to do is we will have on chain shard governance, meaning that someone who wants to develop a custom shard can do that themselves if they're a
Mm-hmm.
qualified developer, and they can submit that to the community for review. And if the community approves it, it'll go live on the blockchain. And that's something that I know Ethereum will never do because they don't believe in on chain governance for that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to be able to do that sort of thing. This is much more open to having external developers who want to do that. Obviously, it would still go through a review process, so it's not going to be like anybody can just do anything they want on it. But it would be something that the community has the ability to govern the direction of the project, the types of shards that would be created, and would be able to have some voice in that directly, as opposed to just having a centralized team that says this is what we're going to do, and anyone who wants to do anything new has to come through us. So it's going to have that. It will also have the same decentralized budget, so it'll have a
Mm-hmm.
sustainable amount of funds for people to enhance the blockchain and do work on it over time. So it'll have all the types of benefits I described that Phore has as well.
Yeah, basically, Phore is a more evolved Ethereum 2.0 because, Ethereum 2.0 will just do a revolution of the blockchain because it will probably become faster and it will change. It will not be more um, in an action based, as you said. So you will not have to pay more if you want to be in the next block. But yeah, you are more evolved than the actual Ethereum. The
Well,
problem
yeah, I
is,
mean, I don't want to like try and like either say something bad about Ethereum or anything else either. I mean, I think they're different, and I
yeah.
think Ethereum has approached certain things differently that I think might be better for them and for certain things, and other things that we've
Hmm.
done I think might be better for other types of things. So one other example is the interface for developing a shard, I think, is a lot easier to use on Graphene than it will be on Ethereum. That Ethereum took
Hmm.
a much more abstracted approach to that, which does mean that it's more flexible. You might be able to do a few things with an Ethereum shard that you can't do on a Graphene shard, but at the same time, 99.9% of the things you would ever imagine to do, you can do on Graphene, but you can also do it a lot faster because we've built in a lot of the base functions that we think anybody would use the same way, like just how do you validate a block or how do you store a block. Like a lot of those things would be pretty standard for a lot of things, and
Hmm.
so we built in a lot of those features, which would mean that the developer doesn't have to write all that code for every single shard, where they would have to do that for Ethereum. So there are some key differences, but I definitely have a ton of respect for all the Ethereum developers that are working on that, and I think that's going to be a great system too. But I also think they will evolve differently based on the things I mentioned. They're going to have different priorities. They're probably going to be much more focused on smart contracts and the types of things that they do. I'm not sure how many different shard types they're going to have. They might also take a lot longer to develop those shard types because, again, they have to go through kind of a centralized committee and decide and go through the whole process that they have for deciding what to add to it. So I think we may be able to be a lot more fast moving with innovation and being able to add different types of things to our blockchain architecture. So I think we will have a lot of advantages, but at the same time, I have a lot of respect for everything that Ethereum's doing.
Yeah, I mean, those are two different cryptocurrencies, you're right. But yeah, I was talking about the scalability because all the two blockchains will surely have many derivatives talking about currencies because, as you may know,
Mm-hmm.
um, the majority of the cryptocurrencies are coming from the ERC20 network and protocol. So, everything is coming from Ethereum blockchain. So it's based on the same blockchain. And yeah, having some, you know, competition. I don't think it's more competition, but choice. So you have choice to choose something else, which is not the difficulty of Ethereum, but is maybe the simplicity of Graphene. And yeah, many developers will never have this crazy idea or abstract idea that needs to be created using a blockchain different from Graphene. I mean, what I'm saying is that, yeah, people have creativity, they have many ideas, but I don't think that Ethereum is essential to create the blockchain system. I mean, uh, as it's more difficult, Graphene will try to simplify this, and at the same time, it will allow more people to join the project and to, study deeply the system, the blockchain of the blockchain system. So this is really great. I mean, I think that this will be a great project because it will for sure help also newbie developers to create something that they never thought that they would create. So this is really
Yeah,
great.
I'm really excited about it, and I really want to get as many developers involved, both with the blockchain development itself, as well as developing applications for it, developing smart contracts for it. So, we want to encourage everyone to get involved once we get to the point where we have a test net live. You can start doing tests with it there, and then once we're ready to go live with the main net, I think it would be great to have as many people as possible bringing their ideas and trying them
Mhm.
out and seeing what they can do and being creative. I mean, that's really my dream in terms of how we want this to go, is to have a lot of developers being able to try out their things and create applications, being able to have it not have huge fees, being able to not have to worry about scalability concerns, and being able to really, create those innovative applications that blockchain enables.
What do you think that will be the future of Graphene? What do you want to see um, as an application of the blockchain in real life or also in digital life? What do you think it's the best to have inside the Graphene project as a blockchain?
Yeah, I see it as unlimited. I mean, I don't really see an end to it. I think because the way smart contracts work, you can basically do anything a computer can do. But I think the way this particular architecture is written, it executes a lot faster than what the current Ethereum can do.
Mhm.
It probably runs smart contracts 200 times faster or something like that. A lot faster than what it would take on the current computer, which means you can do a lot more with it in a given period of time. And that's without even taking into account the scalability things we just talked about with having a bunch of blockchains running in parallel. So I think we could potentially do a lot more complex applications than what's possible, because there is a limit to gas fees or a limit to how much computing you can do with some of the current generation things. And so I think a lot more complex applications, you could have complete businesses that might be able to run their whole business just right on the blockchain and have pretty complex processes that would be enabled there. And I think, but at first, I think I would just be trying to build some of the foundational things.
Mhm.
So I would expect we might be trying to get someone to develop something like a Uniswap or a Pancake Swap for the Graphene blockchain, so that we can have tokens and have an exchange within that, just like the ones that are there. And I would expect a lot of DeFi things to come up there and a lot of NFT related projects. And, really it would be driven by the community. It's going to be what they want. And we want to listen all along the way to say, what features do you want? What types of applications do you want? And we are going to take the same approach of saying we want to develop applications that the community wants, but we also want to encourage other developers to do the same thing. And to the extent we can with that decentralized funding, we may try and fund some of those efforts through that decentralized funding as well. Because again, they'll have the same access to that system that we do. And if
Mhm.
they have a really great idea, then they can just get funding for what they want to do and get paid in Graphene and help build out that ecosystem themselves. So we want it to be a very open system with as much participation as possible. And again, I think it could go across pretty much any industry. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could be done with it, both in terms of the types of shards that could be designed, as well as the applications that could be written for those shards. So if you had something like decentralized storage, you could have a lot of different applications that use a lot of data that are resident on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you could have smart contracts that are using that data. So there may be machine learning and AI related things. You could potentially have a complete social network that runs on it because it would potentially be able to support both the data and the processing that that would need. So even that network concept that I talked about might be enabled by some of the functions on Graphene. And I think, it's hard for me to say what you couldn't do with it. So I'm really excited about it, and I'm excited to see where it goes because I think there's a lot of different things that could be done with it, and I really want the community to have a big voice in terms of what the priorities are for what they want us to build.
Wow. I mean, the fact that it's still in development, maybe it's a pity because, you know, I would like to see the project right now developed, totally developed right now, and,
Mm-hmm.
how it will develop because it's a community driven project, totally community. So, wow, it has, yeah, endless possibilities. And yeah, the
Yeah, no,
fact
I'm
that you,
I'm really looking forward to getting to the launch. We've been working on this
yeah.
airdrop process for a while, and we're kind of finishing up that right now. So once we have those airdrops going, which should be in the next couple weeks,
Hmm.
then we'll be moving forward with getting the test net up to do more testing with it and finish off some of the front end things that we have to do because we still have
Hmm.
to develop like the interface for the wallet. And we're going to be moving as fast as we can towards launching the mainnet for that. And I'm really excited to see it happen. And I certainly wish it was ready already as well. But we want to make sure it's done right. We want to make sure it's done with high quality. And with blockchains, you really have to make sure you put a lot of thought and effort into that to make sure that it's secure and that it's all done with a lot of that quality. So we want to make sure that we're prioritizing that over just saying let's get it out the door and not worry about it being
Hmm.
secure. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
much more important to say we do it right. So that's been our priority all along, and we're going to continue through that to make sure that when it launches, it's going to be working, and we're going to minimize any bugs and other things that we see with it. I can't say that it's going to be perfect; nothing necessarily ever is, but we want to do the best job we can with it in terms of starting out with a high quality product and giving people a really solid platform to build on.
I want to see your perspective about this. You talked about the fundraising function that you may implement in the future inside the Graphene network and the project itself. How do
Mm-hmm.
you think it will work? Do you think that the moderation system used for will be useful also here? You think that moderators will be able to select the projects that will be needed for this fundraising?
Yeah, it'll be a similar concept to what happens with Phore. So with Phore, the voting for proposals goes on with masternode owners. So you have to own a certain amount of Phore to own a masternode. And so you would then get a vote on the proposals based on that. So that's kind of the, having skin in the game in terms of saying you care about the project in order to have a voice to say how you want those funds to be spent. And the same concept will be brought over into Graphene. It'll just be using validators, which is kind of a similar concept to masternodes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more than that because the validators also do the staking function. So it's kind of like you're combining the two, but it still has that element of saying you have skin in the game. You have to put up a certain stake of Graphene tokens to be able to have a voice in that process. But it would be more decentralized even than Phore because the relative amount of graphene that you need compared to the total supply would be a lot smaller. So a lot more people would have access to that. So you would have a lot more
Yeah.
voices, a lot more people that would be able to participate in that process. And I think we may, because we have all this smart contract capability, have a much easier time adding other things to it as well. So you might be able to say in some cases we could have more complex ways of funding things. So you might say we could tie things to milestones where when something's delivered, someone gets paid for it, or things like that. Whereas the current protocol basically says I'm asking for funding up front to do some work. This would potentially be
Mm-hmm.
able to be made more complex where you could say, okay, I'm agreeing to do a certain piece of work. Maybe I get a little bit of a upfront to cover my costs, but then the rest of it gets paid out as it's delivered. So you'd have more of a ability to make sure that it was actually delivered the way that people said. And
Uh-huh.
so I think those types of things would be a lot easier to do when you have smart contracts. And so I would expect that we will evolve that system again with the feedback from the community to say how they want that funding to work. And maybe even have ways of allocating different things for different types of things, like having a certain amount for marketing or a certain amount for development or other, certain amount for external
Mm-hmm.
developers. And we could do a lot of different things with it, but I would want to listen to the community and see what they want. So we're going to start with something similar to Phore, and then we'll evolve it from that point.
One last question for me. Um, what do you, I mean, talking about the fundraising process and the governance one, you said that people will have to vote also for the project to be fundraised. So, how do you think that this will work inside the project? I mean, you said that there will be a minimum of graphene in order to unlock the voting and the governance.
Mhm.
Do you think that one vote for every coin is a good thing, or for one user, the maximum is one vote independently for how much coins they have?
I think it makes more sense to scale it to some extent by the amount of coins that people have, because if someone has a much larger stake, then they have a bigger commitment to the project, right? And so I think it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to have that sort of system to it. But I think we do want to make it available to as many people who want to participate, and that's one of the reasons why just having one validator would be a lot less expensive than what it would cost for Phore in terms of the relative scale of what you would have to invest to do that. So I think that will allow a lot more people to have those voices, and to the extent people want to have a voice in that process, they can. And but I think one of the important factors is that you want to have people have enough skin in the game that they actually care, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
someone wanted to, let's say, attack that process, they could say, "Oh, if I can just buy one coin and have a vote, and it's the same as someone who has 100,000 coins." Well, then that would mean they could maybe someone who doesn't like graphene could say, "I'm going to just vote for the bad thing, or I'm going to vote against something good because I don't want it to happen." Right? So you
Yeah.
want to have again that skin. You want to have that I'm investing in the project and therefore I care about it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why to me it makes sense to say the more you have invested, the more of a voice you would have, because that would mean that you're really wanting the best for the project and you're not going to try and do something bad through that process.
Don't you think that at this point, maybe some people that um, that will try to change the poll results from the governance system. I mean, if one person has 1,000 coins and they say at a certain point, the last decisions made by the community just caused me damage, and they vote against the new proposal,
Mm-hmm.
and they are able to change the result, is this a problem? I mean, do you think that this could happen? And if yes, do you solve it? I mean, how can you solve it if you can?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's likely, only because
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the distribution of the four coin, and that's directly relevant to how graphene is being distributed, because
Mm-hmm.
basically it's 10 to 1, so you'll get 10 graphene
10 to 1,
coins
okay.
for every one four that you held through this airdrop process. So
Mm-hmm.
it'll be the same distribution factor, and I don't think there's anyone that owns a huge percentage of four. Even our team doesn't own. I think it's much less than 10% of the supply. It might be closer to 5% or something for the entire team that's working on Phore. So, the I don't think there's anyone that is this big whale that's going to be able to just control the whole thing. And again, in order to get that kind of influence, they would probably have to bid up the price so high to get to that point that they would end up having to basically buy out everybody, and I don't think that would be very feasible just for that purpose. So I think, to me, I don't think it's very likely, given that it is a highly decentralized and distributed coin to begin with. And then the reward structure is relatively low inflation. It's not going to be a huge reward thing, because I know some projects may start out with really high rewards, and so the early investors end up with a huge percentage of the amount. So that can result in
Mm-hmm.
what you're talking about. But that's not the case for graphene, because we're going to start with a pretty low inflation rate to begin with, because it's kind of growing out of Phore. So there's no reason to do that kind of incentive. I think the reason projects do that is that they want to provide an incentive for people to start using the network. So they'll say, hey, you can have all these extra rewards. But then
Mm-hmm.
again, one of the unintended consequences is that you end up with a few people that have a huge supply or a huge share of the coin. And that certainly can be a problem. But I just don't think that applies to Phore. And I don't think it'll apply to graphene, because we're already highly distributed. There's not really anybody that would have more than maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of the supply at most, and most of it is much lower than that. So I think, given that kind of distribution, it's just already highly decentralized, and I don't think there would be any way that one person or one group of people could exert that kind of control over the project. Now, let's say I'm wrong. Something results in that, I think the community could then vote for that too. I mean, I certainly would listen to the people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I'm not going to be listening to people, right? So if we ended up with some big whale that somehow had 50% of the supply or something, and everybody else said this doesn't work and it's not going the way we want, I think we would be able to come up with a way of dealing with that. We would just have to have a discussion with all the people that are part of the community and come to a decision about how we wanted to handle it. So I think, the if there was that kind of attack from that perspective where somebody was somehow able to get a huge amount of the supply and was actually doing negative things to the project, well, we're not just going to sit there and let it happen. We're gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna find a way to solve it. So I think, to me, there are plenty of ways to solve that. I just don't think it's likely to happen, so I don't worry about it. It doesn't keep me up nights. But I
Mm-hmm.
think at the same time, if it did happen, there would be plenty of ways to deal with that. However we needed to prevent something bad from happening to the project through that kind of process.
And what about the team? I mean, the Phore team will be able to vote also for the community projects, or they will not be able to. What do you think about this?
I think they would have a voice for the same reason everyone else would, but it would just be again related to how much of the supply they own. I mean, I treat everybody kind of equally from that perspective. I don't think it's
Uh-huh.
any different. We don't have any extra privileges, but I also wouldn't want to penalize them any more than any other person that owned the coin either. So I think, to me, again, it's that skin of the game. If you've contributed to Phore and you earn Phore with it, then that's your contribution. And if you decide to hold on to it instead of selling it, then you should be able to have influence based on that. But again, even the entire team doesn't have a huge percentage of the coin, and it is highly distributed already. So I think I don't think there would be a problem with that with either Phore or Graphene in terms of the team being able to control it. And if there was that situation, then again, I would say we'll listen to the community. I'm not going to do some really controversial thing and say, oh, we're just going to ignore what the community wants and do it anyway. We're going to, whenever we have had any controversial decisions, and there haven't been many, but there have been a couple, um,
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of discussion within the community. We went into Discord and we opened up a channel to talk about it. We laid out what we thought were all the pros and cons, and we had a listening period where we got everybody's thoughts on it and really listened to them and made adjustments if we needed to. And so I think to me, it's something where we would want to be making sure everyone does have a
Mm-hmm.
voice, even if their ultimate voting power is limited, and that we're listening to that, because we would not want to make it a project that's just for a few privileged people. That just wouldn't make sense. So I think, I haven't seen an issue with that really yet, because I think everybody wants the best for the project in our
Mm-hmm.
community, and I'm really proud of that, because I think we have a very positive community that's all pulling together and really believes in what we're doing. And I certainly want to grow that a lot more and have even more people involved, and I hope that that continues to happen. But I don't think that in any case we would say, oh, we're just going to have the people who own the most really make all the decisions. I think in any case where it is anything slightly controversial, we would open up that kind of dialogue and make sure that we hear people before we even make any kind of voting decision.
Yeah, this question came from the fact that many teams inside of the cryptocurrency projects have uh, almost the majority of the coins, or
Mm-hmm.
anyway, doesn't have the majority of the coins, but have more voting power um, compared to the normal investors, because they are part of the team, and so they are compensated in a different way from the investors, that they are going from staking, but the team is not getting you know I'm not saying they're getting a monthly fee or something, but they have usually more coins inside their wallets because they are part of the teams, and so they have um, they have a direct contact with the one who is managing the project. They can ask for more coins, and at the same time they can try to vote against what the community wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I understand that that sort of thing can happen, and maybe it does happen with some projects. I just have never seen it with any of our projects. I mean, it's just, we've been pretty lucky, maybe, but we have a lot of alignment and agreement within our community, and there's only been a couple of things, and usually I was able to anticipate that up front to say, okay, this one might be controversial, so let's make sure we talk to everybody and get their feedback before we even put a proposal in the system to make
Mhm.
sure that it's something that everybody supports. And maybe that's just how we've approached it, and maybe other projects approach things differently. But I think we've had overwhelming support from our community throughout everything we've been doing, and I've been really kind of even surprised that we've had such a high level of support from everything that we've done. And again, I really love the community that Phore has grown, and I'm hoping we can do the same thing with Graphene once we're launched and we have kind of more of a separation between the projects. And I really do think a lot of the same people will carry over into that community, so I'm really excited about that. And I just again, I've dealt with controversial decisions in my career before. I mean, I was a consultant for really large professional services firms for 25 years, and I served Fortune 500 clients and some of the biggest companies you would ever know. And so I've dealt with political decisions that were controversial where lots of people didn't
Mhm.
agree. I understand how
Yeah.
to facilitate those discussions. I've done that as a consultant, and I've dealt directly with C-level executives on those sorts of things. So I can certainly bring that skill set to the table if I need to in a situation where there
Mhm.
is some disagreement. But I think to me we just haven't had a lot of situations where we've had trouble getting consensus for people. And so I would certainly continue to do that in the future and make sure that we do keep people aligned and that we listen to feedback, both positive and negative, to make sure that we're responsive to that and we're doing what the community wants.
Yeah, maybe because this is a decentralized project, this doesn't even seem a problem, because in centralized projects, the team has the majority of the coins, or at least they have a higher
Mhm.
percentage compared to the investors. But as it's a decentralized project, maybe, there is always a different allocation of the funds inside a project. So I think that, maybe you have to keep an eye on this, but yeah, if you know how to manage the project, I think that this maybe isn't even a problem for now, and even if for the future, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it as a problem, and I certainly am ready to handle situations like that if I need to, but I really don't
Yeah.
anticipate it being a problem. Obviously, things can change in the future. You don't know how things are going to evolve over time, but I really do have a faith in both our team and in the community, and so I take a very open stance as far as anybody can come talk to me. They can start a conversation with me directly.
Hmm.
If anybody has any complaints or questions, I always answer them. Either for the group within the Discord or Telegram channels and things like that we have, or I will handle things individually with people if I need to. And again, it's not run like an executive decision thing where I'm just saying here's how it's going to be. It's like here are our ideas, here's what we plan to do, because it does need to have leadership. But at the
Yeah.
same time, if people say I don't like that or I think this other thing would be better, I'm glad to hear that. I love hearing people's ideas and feedback because I've also done a startup before. I was the lead over the technology team that developed Tektura, which was a construction billing application that eventually got sold to Oracle for $663 million. And I went through that process knowing that we didn't have all the answers at the beginning. Like
Hmm.
I hadn't
Yeah.
worked in construction before, so our customers knew this space a lot better than we did at the start. And so a lot of my job was saying, okay, we need to listen to the customers, we need to hear what they need, and then we need to build that into the system and make whatever changes we need to make it work well for them. And so I am very familiar with that process, and that's what I brought to this team as well. I think is the ability to say, I'm listening to the community, I'm hearing the ideas, I'm hearing what they need, I'm hearing what we need to do, and I'm being responsive to that to try and give them exactly what they need to make a successful system and a successful platform
Hmm.
to both serve people who are investors, people who are using it and using the products, as well as the people who are developing for the project, because there's those different groups that all have a stake in what we're doing. So I want to make it attractive to developers, I want to make it attractive to users, and I want to make it attractive to investors. So the overall guiding principle is we want this to be adding as much value as possible to people. We want it to be useful, we want it to solve real problems, and we want it to just make it be the most useful and valuable platform that we can.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really nice. I mean, really, this is fantastic. It's like, uh, you know, it's like changing the leadership, but at the same time, you are holding it because the leadership is for the is on the community at the moment because they are driving this project actually. You're just
Hmm.
saying what are your ideas, and then the community develops the project itself. So you are not even trying to say, okay, what can I do next? Because you have the community to do so. It's like, um, it's like thousands of people that are inside the development team of the project. So this is really great.
Yeah, I mean, the general approach with most startups and things like that is you need to come with your ideas first. You can't just come with a
Yeah,
blank sheet of paper and say, "Tell me what to do," because that'll never get you any sort of coherent answer. But if you can come with an idea and say, "Here's what we're planning to do, but I want feedback," and then as soon as you can show them something and say, "Here's the first version of it," well, then they can say, "Oh, that's great, but I want this feature, or it won't work unless I can do this as well." And so once they have something to react to, it's a lot easier for a customer to be able to say, "Here's what I want. Here's what I want in addition to what you have, or here's how I want it to be improved." And so
yeah.
that's where a lot of the listing starts. I mean, obviously, you do as much research as you can into your customers and what they need and what they want, so that you can come with a good version. And that's what we've been doing. But I don't expect it to just be a static thing where like we did the development for Graphene and then it's done. I mean, that's just the starting gate in my mind, where it's like, once people are using it, we're going to discover a lot more, and we're going to get a lot of feedback from the people using it to say, here's what I want on top of what you've already built, or here's what I want changed. And we'll be very responsive to that to make sure that it is useful to them and that it's providing a lot of value to everyone who's using it.
I have a question from Foss Games, which is from our Twitch chat. He says, what are some things that you want to see developed on Graphene? Something that, you do want to see that you may like to use it also.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think at the start, we're planning to launch with something with a shard type similar to Bitcoin, where you can transfer funds and have a nice,
Mhm.
fast, secure transfers. And then I think the next priority is to enable smart contracts. So that'll be kind of the next thing that we'll develop, and that'll come hopefully pretty soon after the initial launch. And then from there, I think it opens up a lot of different possibilities in terms of types of shards to add. So I think once we have smart contracts, then what I would be hoping for is that a lot of people would be interested in providing a lot of the types of facilities that are already present on most of the other major smart contract platforms. So things like having something like a Uniswap or a PancakeSwap, being able to do all the variety of DeFi related types of things that are already there, probably having some kind of NFT capability. Obviously, we're going to be having token standards so people can develop tokens, and I'd love to see people developing their own tokens for whatever purpose they have in mind for that, whether it is DeFi related or something else. And so I think that's the starting point. That's what I would like to see built first. Once we get to that point, it becomes a lot more open in terms of where we go from there. I think, to me, it would be a lot better to say, let's get to that point, and then let's see what people want and see what the market wants at that point, because there may be a lot of different priorities at that point. I mean, if we go back 2 years, nobody was talking about NFTs, and now that's like everything you see on social media is NFT related. And 2 years from now, it might be something else, right? So I think the priorities might be something very different. Maybe we'll be talking about some kind of metaverse related thing. Maybe we'll be talking about some other thing that we just haven't even
Mhm.
imagined today. And so I can't really predict exactly where we're going to be at any given point in time. But I know my immediate priorities are to get this platform launched, to have wallets that work well, and to be able to get the basic functions that I know we need, and
Yeah.
then to be able to get that feedback and do more research and be able to say, here's what I think make sense to come next. And I'd be very much open to ideas from the community on that. So I think, to me, that's the way I'm looking at it, is there's a certain set of fundamental things that I think we're going to need to make it a fully functional platform, both from a transfer and store value perspective as well as a smart contract perspective. And then from that point, I think we would start looking at different things that might be very different than anything you've seen on any other platform.
We don't have any other questions from the community at the moment, but I have one last question, and well, it's not related to the Phore project, but what do you think about NFT? Do you think that it's something that will pass, that no one will consider anymore in a couple of years, or do you think that it's something that will last for many years to come?
Well, the concept of NFTs, I think, will be around. I think it'll probably change over time. I mean, I think the current craze with NFTs, a lot of it is art related, images or videos or 3D types of things. And a lot of it, you might think of as like collectibles, like a trading card or something like that. And I think to me that could potentially be a fad or come and go over time, or have different values over different periods of time. But I think that is still a valid use case. I mean, to the extent someone considers that art valuable, then I think that has value. What I also think, though, is there's a lot more you can do with NFTs. I mean, I think some of these things we've already seen where like generative NFTs, where it can kind of create unique ones based on when you actually purchase it. So you might have a unique thing that you don't even know until you purchase it. But I think you could go even further than that. I mean, an NFT, the concept itself is just saying it's a unique token that is, maybe not divisible, although I think some of them can be divided as well. But it represents ownership of something. And I think what it represents in terms of that ownership can mean a lot of things. You could have deeds for actual real life property. You could have programs. So it could be almost like a license for a program where you own what that program does. And that could be pretty complex. It could give you a whole set of functionality that nobody else has. And it's kind of like buying a software license. And so to me, that could be a lot more sophisticated than what we've seen so far. So, it might be something where, let's say even within a metaverse context, if you're living in a virtual world, it might be something that actually does something within a gaming context, for example. Like maybe it's a, piece of armor or or weapon or something that is unique, and you were able to get that capability within that context by buying that NFT. And potentially you could have even similar things that really cross over more into the real world. Like you have a certain privilege or a certain access to something, like getting into a concert, or having access to a celebrity or something like that, where this NFT represents real life ownership of something. And I think there's a million different things you could do with that. You could go so many different directions with that. And so I don't think NFTs are going away. I think it'll keep building, and I think it'll probably even be more exciting in the future when you start seeing what some of these things really can do that haven't even really been done yet. So I don't think it's a concept that's just going to be like, oh, the NFTs was a fad and we're never going to talk about that again. I think it started with CryptoKitties, which kind of crashed the Ethereum network because it was so popular, and then it sort of died down for a while, and now it's back. And I do think there'll be future waves with different types of things as people explore what can be done with NFTs. So I do think the concept itself has a lot of possibilities, and I do think it could be extended even a lot further than what people have done with it so far.
I remember CryptoKitties. It is one of the first projects based on NFTs that is born in the cryptocurrency world. Really, it is a great project also that. But I think that NFTs are quite useless at the moment. They don't have a practical application yet. I mean, it's okay if you're an artist and you're selling, 3D sculptures or something like that. Also diamonds, because there is this project that sells NFTs, which is Bitmons. They sell basically virtual diamonds. And well, the concept is good because you are having a diamond that is unique, so no one will ever have something that is the same that you have. And also you can fit it, you can use it because you can just transfer the diamond on your watch, and yes, people can see your diamond inside your smartwatch, and this is great. But apart from those projects we far that are more developed than these new ones, I think that NFTs as for now are quite useless.
Well, again, the way I look at it is, it's like, certain people are collectors of things and other people aren't, and that's okay. You might say, I look at this stuff and I think it's useless, and nothing wrong with that point of view. But other people might look at the same thing and think this is worth a lot and I want to have it and it's worth it to me to pay for it. And if you just look at the art market itself, right? There's lots of people making paintings and drawings and pictures and sculptures and things like that. And to some people, they would look at that and say that's worthless. And other people would say, wow, that's a masterpiece. So I don't think you can necessarily say it's worthless to everybody, even if it looks worthless to you. And I think, the value of something is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, some people might say this is really the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I think if you compare it to other collectibles, let's say baseball cards, some people will just be like, well, those are worthless. Why would you ever want a baseball card? But then other people think, wow, this is a rare Mickey Mantle and there's only 5 of them left or whatever, and think I really want to own that and have a piece of history. And I think some people are looking at some of the current NFTs the same way. They think this is a new thing and it's an early stage thing, and they want to have a piece of that history. And that may be worth it to them, and it may even be more worth it in the future. It might increase in value because someone else would say, I'd love to own that piece of history in the future. And I think while I do think that that value could be there now, depending on your point of view, it may also be that the majority of NFTs being sold today might not be worth much in the future. You don't know. It's hard to predict how that's going to work out. But I think at the same time, like I said, there's so much more you could do with NFTs than you are doing today. It doesn't have to be just a static piece of artwork. It could be
Yeah.
something with a lot of functionality behind it, because you could tie it to smart contracts and you could do almost anything that a computer program could do. But that also means you could tie it into the real world. You could say, this gives you access to a private club, right? In the real world.
Yeah.
Or, I know there was some rock band, I forget exactly which one, but they said if you buy our NFT, you get front row tickets or some great tickets to our concerts for the rest of your life. Like,
Oh wow.
that's a different type of value, right? Like, and that,
Yeah.
again, might be worthless to one person, but almost priceless to another person. So I think there's a lot of potential ways this could evolve, and I don't think the concept of NFTs is useless. I think that there's a lot of really useful things that could be done with it. But again, a lot of the stuff as far as art's concerned is really just how much do you appreciate that art, and how do you look at it? Because I think certain people look at it very differently than others, and they might say, I want to be this exclusive person that only has one of these monkeys or these lions, and that means a lot to them. And maybe it does give them some sort of credibility within the NFT community. And again, it's hard for me to put a value on something like that, because it's all based on who appreciates that type of thing and what value they place on it.
Yeah. We have another question from the community. Why did you pick Binance Smart Chain versus Ethereum to release Graphene on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the original idea was going to be we'll do it on Ethereum just because that was the biggest smart contract, platform to launch it on. But at
Mm-hmm.
the time, especially, the fees on Ethereum were just so expensive that we were worried that smaller holders of Phore would end up having to pay so much in fees just to get the redemption of their tokens that it wouldn't
Yeah.
be worth it to them, right? They would have to pay maybe even more in fees than whatever they thought the graphene was worth. So we decided at that time to say, okay, Binance doesn't have as much, high as high fees. So we were going to try and lower the fees to make sure that it was accessible to as many people as possible, and they wouldn't have really high fees to pay when they redeem their tokens and when they want to trade their tokens and things like that. So it was always meant to be a temporary thing. We want to give people ownership and be able to establish a market for the token and get an
Yeah.
idea of what they're worth and those sorts of things, because that may actually help us tune some of the final crypto economics for Graphene. But we just thought that doing it on the Binance Smart Chain would make it more affordable for people. And then once we launch the platform, we would have a similar process to convert those back into native coins. So then they would just become native coins on Graphene. And again, we would anticipate that we might have a similar type of ability to trade things and have people do exchange sorts of things within the Graphene platform. So at that point, it probably wouldn't matter where we started from. It was just that during this phase between where we are now and where we launched the mainnet, that we have a place for people to be able to buy and sell tokens and start using those in terms of having their ownership of that Graphene.
Yeah. One question from me this time. Did you ever consider using the Tier C network, the Tron network? Because it is without fees. Basically, it's feeless. And,
Mm-hmm.
well, it could be a great launch. And I mean, it could be a great time to launch a project on Tron network because, it's a smaller project and people are incentivized to take the project because there are no fees basically.
Yeah, we didn't really talk much about Tron, but I guess what I would say about that is that one of the reasons we wanted to do this token phase is not just to, give people tokens and start trading them, like I said, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also to draw more people into the project, to give them more
Yeah.
awareness of what we're doing. And so that was the reason we started with Ethereum, because we thought that would give us the most exposure. And
Yeah.
when we looked for an alternative, we wanted to get as close as we could to that in terms of having a large community with a lot of people involved. And that seemed to be Binance Smart Chain at that point in time. So I think there just isn't as much exposure and as many people using Tron. So it wouldn't give us that same benefit of having as many
Yeah.
people become aware of what we're doing. So that's really the way we were thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean Tron network is one of the greatest networks I think because I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
it doesn't have any fee, it's wow, really great. I mean, talking
Yeah,
about
no, I mean
Bitcoin,
that is great. I just, again, it's kind of a balancing of different things, right? Like we
yeah,
wanted to not have it be completely unaffordable, and we probably would have used
yeah,
Ethereum if it just didn't have such really high fees, where we thought this just isn't going to be very usable for people. Um, but at the same time, we wanted to have a big enough community in that on that platform to be able to say that it's going to get a lot of exposure. So we just wanted to make sure that it would get as many people looking at it as possible and be able to get more people into the community. And so we were trying to balance those different benefits.
hmm yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, I have a last question, I think, and then I suppose that we are done. Are
Okay.
you scared? I mean, when you decided to use the Binance Smart Chain to rely on your project, did you think that drug pools and all those scam projects will anyhow you know try people to stay away from your project because it was kind of a scam, because people are seeing, actually on these times, almost on these times, are seeing many projects that are scamming every day inside the Binance Smart Chain. Do you think that this is a problem for also thinking about the marketplace? I mean, do you think that it's safe enough for also newbie investors to use for instead of other cryptocurrencies, which are more traditional, like Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin?
Well, it sounds like those are two separate questions. I think in
Yeah.
terms of Binance Smart Chain, I think we've gone through a very rigorous process developing what we've done. Certainly, there's no rug pull coming. I understand those things happen, and I hate it when those happens. Every time I see something like that, it makes me mad because I want this whole industry to do things better, and I hate when people either get their coins stolen or people get hacked or there's some sort of thing where a project is scamming people, and so I very much want to stay away from anything like that. But at the same time, I don't think there's anything that would affect us directly with that because we are doing everything the right way. We had an audit done of all our smart contract code. And I think someone gave us some feedback saying they wanted to make sure that we wouldn't be able to like mint more coins. And I think, we're trying to do like remove certain functions just to make people more comfortable that that wouldn't happen, just by saying when we deploy the smart contracts, those we will just mint the amount for the exchange itself, like for
Uh-huh.
the same way we did with Cryptcoin to Phore, just
Mm-hmm.
mint the amount that would need to be there if everybody redeemed it, and then that would be it, and you wouldn't be able to create any more of it. So we're being very transparent with that. I even shared the audit report with the community, and so we're being very open about how we're doing everything, and I think everybody in the Phore community knows that we've been around since 2017. This isn't some new thing, right? Like we're not someone that's coming out of nowhere, and we
Yeah.
have every incentive to make this thing work. And we've been working hard on Graphene for several years too. So we've put a lot of effort into this, and we want to make it as successful as possible. And so everything we're doing has been very legitimate from the start. We've been very open and very transparent about everything, and I don't think there's any chance that anything like that would happen to us. But I think we're trying to do everything as legitimately as possible and also make people feel as comfortable as possible through that process. I personally don't think what happens to another project really reflects on our project. So I can't really take responsibility for what anybody else does. But I think to me, it's just a matter of saying like this is it gives us this capability to bring in a new user base, and it might even be a refreshing thing for them to see something really legitimate and totally on the up and up, completely transparent, nothing shady's going on, and that may attract some of those people to our project because they're
Yeah.
seeing how much better it is than something that just came out of nowhere from yesterday and they don't even know who's running it. I mean, we all use our real names. We're not just pseudonyms, right? Like we're real people. You can contact us directly, and we've been around for a long time, and we're not going anywhere. So, to me, I think there is a high level of trust, and I think there should be, and so I'm not really worried about that. But I do recognize that some people have that problem that they've been ripped off by things, and I totally feel for them because I think it's terrible when those things happen to people. Your other question was, I think, having to do with using Phore. Um, to me, I would say, that it is a different thing. Like Phore is a relatively low market cap coin compared to anything like
Mm-hmm.
Ethereum or Binance or
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So I'm not going to pretend like we're just, going to be the next Bitcoin tomorrow necessarily, but I think there certainly is, to me, a very promising future for Phore. Everything I just talked about is a pretty ambitious vision. I mean, I'll have to detail out it in a lot more detail as we go forward and get some more published articles around things like that to give a better articulation of the vision. But to me, it's a very powerful concept that you would have the ability to have an open social network, but also have the ability to have kind of membership groups within that network that can align with each other and have a whole suite of tools to be able to trade with each other in terms of kind of like a private economy, as well as having tools to publish content and tools to have courses and all the different things that a creator might want to manage their community. And so to me, that could be a very powerful concept. And I already know that there are groups that want this, because that's one of the reasons I'm doing it, is I already have probably at least one customer ready to go right now. If we could deliver this, they would be using it. So, to me, there is a very definite need for this to be in a more decentralized way that can't be deplatformed, it can't be censored, and it has all the capabilities that they want, that some of which may not even exist at all today. And so I think what we're doing, to me, is a very promising and important vision. And so I think for people to look at the future of Phore, you need to look at what you think of that and decide if you want to invest in it. And that's a personal decision for everybody. Again, we've been around a long time. We've handled things, I think, pretty well through the years, and we've done a lot of active development of our project, and we're going to continue to do that in the future. We're going to continue to grow our team in the future and accelerate our development even further. And so that's, my vision overall about how I approach everything, is to say I want to add as much value as I can and listen to the direction of the community and what people need, and to try and deliver those things and make it as useful and valuable as possible. And so that's how I'm going to approach Phore in the future. That's how I'm going to approach Graphene in the future. And if you think you like what you hear and you want to be part of our community, I'd love to have you.
Well, I will for sure enter. I mean, I will have a look at Graphene project, and I mean, at the general ecosystem of Phore, because, well, this interview has been amazing. So thanks for clarifying our doubts, and also thanks for being here today. Uh, you found the time to stay with us at least for 2 hours, and I really appreciate it. All the team appreciates it, actually. And really,
Great.
thanks also for sponsoring our next tournament, with that will be tomorrow. And well, thanks again for this session. I hope we will do something else in the future of similar.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it again. I've had a lot of fun, and I wish you the best of luck with your tournament tomorrow.
Thank you, mate. And well, thanks for being here. And well, have a good evening.
Okay, thanks very much.
Goodbye, guys. And well, goodbye, Michael. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.